For a couple of times on Austin Faith Dialogue, we've been looking at Austin's religious history through stories and pictures. This week, we wrap up that show. Stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you've joined us for today's show on Austin Faith Dialogue. For a couple of times here on the show, we've looked at Austin's religious history through pictures and stories, and today we finish up with all of that with Reverend Bruno C. Schmidt. It's your photographs and your stories that we're listening to. We're glad you're here today.
Thank you.
So let's get started, and you pick up the story where we left off.
Yes. We begin today with the slide of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is on East 11th Street at Natchez. And there's something about those stones that is interesting. They were recycled from what used to be the Central Christian Church when it was on the location at 8th and Colorado, and that is now a place occupied by the federal courthouse. But these stones can still be recognized here if you look at the old picture. This is a postcard we have of telling something about the First Baptist Church. In the little inset at the top, right top, there is a picture of the old Texas Capitol and the very first building that they had. The church was organized, congregation was organized in 1847, and then when it came to having a building, they got in touch with Governor Sam Houston, and he being a Baptist, he said, it would be easy for me to go to church if it was right across the street. And so that's where that first little building up there was. Now, the other one that you see in the larger portion of the postcard is the last building that stood in that particular place. And we had another picture here. This is also a church that was used as a house of worship for the First Baptist Church in that location across Colorado Street, right across from the governor's mansion. And then the next slide that we have is another one that was taken from that same postcard. There are, or should have been, other pictures probably I might have had available, but this was also photographed from that postcard. And that church was still standing when I came to Austin in 1964. And then after a while, the congregation moved to another location on East 9th and Trinity, just east of the former downtown main post office, the last one we had downtown. May we have the next slide? This is a picture of the church. Showing on the left is the bell tower, and then over to the right is the main edifice. It's somewhat indistinct there, but they had 3 dedications for the First Baptist Church. One was for the congregation, one was for all the Baptists of the neighborhood, and the next one was for the general community, which would be represented by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries today. They had, at the dedication service, they had Rabbi Judah Fish reading the Prayer of Solomon, from the Prayer of Solomon, and then Bishop Reicher was there to give greeting, and Dr. Edmund Heinzen, pastor emeritus at that time of University Methodist Church, preached the sermon, and he was in full flight that day. Mm-hmm. Next picture, if you please. This shows, again, the bell tower and the main portion. The First Baptist Church has a wonderful Frere Casavant pipe organ made in Canada, and if you've ever been there, it's a wonderful piece of instruments. Mm-hmm. Next picture, if you picture. This is something I found in the files as I was doing the research. It shows the result of something that was done in a vacation church school of the Hyde Park Baptist Church youth. And they found this, I think it's an old military building that was moved on a site here in Austin for the Spanish-speaking, and a congregation was started through that particular effort. As I went on, I finally decided that must be something else yet. And so the next picture that we have here is a picture of the church Betania, which is still operating in very good form and a result of that effort. Next picture, please. And this is a picture of what is now known as El Buen Pastor Presbyterian Church for the Spanish-speaking in East Austin. That was the Ward Memorial Methodist Church, as it there appears. And it was really the second Methodist church in Austin and East Austin on what is, the location here is Willow and Waller Streets. It has a number, when the Ward Memorial congregation remodeled the building as it is there now, they got some of the pictures out of the old 10th Street Methodist Church, and they're still in that particular church. Mm-hmm. And then let's have another picture. This is another picture of the Ward Memorial Church, which now has changed its name. They thought they used the bishop's name long enough, so that now they call themselves the Parker Lane United Methodist Church. Next picture. And then here is a picture of, I believe that is, yes, that's the former house of worship for the Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, on Red River, north of 32nd Street. It is now no longer used as a house of worship. That congregation has moved to Parker Lane also. And may we have the next picture. And this is a picture of the Reformed or reorganized Latter-day Saints out on Bluebonnet Lane. Another picture, please. And here, it's indistinct. It's also of the congregation of that Bluebonnet Lane Mormon church. Next picture, please. Here is a picture that was northeast of the Capitol on what we today call 13th Street, but it is really, it was then called, in 1883, was called Peach Street. And they organized there at the year of the 400th anniversary of Martin Luther's birthday. And that is why they called themselves, at first it was called Evangelische Lutherische Kirche St. Martins. In other words, it was the Evangelical Lutheran Church of St. Martin's, as they called it at first. And there they operated until later on in 1918, there was a hospital north of the state capitol known as the Presbyterian Sanitarium, and it burned down in 1918. And later, the lots were purchased by this congregation, and they had the beautiful new building that we have in this next slide of Austin stone. It was used for about 30 years, but the Texas government wanted to use that property and move on out to the north, as it has done. And this beautiful building had to be demolished, but they are now located on Nueces and 15th Street, as we see it in the next picture. And this is the present St. Martin's Lutheran Church. I think that the old altar that they had, a beautiful piece of furniture that they had in that church that had to be demolished, is now in this sanctuary. May we have another picture. And this is a picture of the St. Paul's Lutheran Church at 16th and Red River. This is Missouri Synod. And their big emphasis has always been on education. There was a minister from the Missouri Synod Church who moved into town, and he became the founder of the Concordia College, which has now developed into what is known as Concordia University. And the next picture is this same congregation's new home, the St. Paul's Church, which is St. Paul's Evangelical Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod, which is north of the campus of Concordia College. Maybe we have the next. And this is a picture here of the first congregational place of worship of what is now known as the University Church of Christ. In 1884, there began to be some disharmony in the congregations because the majority of the Church of Christ began using things that Alexander Campbell would not have sanctioned, and these who wanted to hold to his way of doing felt that was not right, and so they withdrew, and in 1894 on St. Bernard Street they had this first property where they held their services. They sing a cappella in their church. They do not use instruments. And later on, though, they purchased a new building on University Avenue, and that was their first building. I think that was first used as a bank, but it was remodeled then for their church. And they used that for some years, and they were right there at what used to be called 19th and University Avenue, now Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And this is their newest church as they have it now. They had first their sanctuary, which is over toward the left portion, and then they had also things built there for the use of the students. And this church has been the mother church of some 10 or more congregations right within the city of Austin of the Church of Christ. And there is where they still worship today and have quite an influence on the students.
Well, let's stop here, take the mid-show break for some announcements and all, and come back for some more of your stories. And we'll look forward to having all of you stay with us for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. We're glad you stayed with us for Austin Faith Dialogue as we talk about Austin's religious history. But first, I have another announcement to make, and that is that coming up very soon is a workshop on validation therapy for anybody who's interested in going, but primarily for those who are working with older persons who may have become confused. The workshop is sponsored by the Gray Panthers of Austin. Anyone is welcome to go, and it will be Thursday through Saturday, November 5th, 6th, and 7th. If this sounds like something you'd need and would like to go to, do call the Gray Panthers right away and get down to that workshop. So now we'll continue with your slides and stories, and our guest again is Reverend Bruno C. Schmidt. You're a pastor emeritus related to First United Methodist Church, but I would say related to all of Austin through your stories. Let's pick up with where we left off in the stories here.
Yes. This is a picture of the Evangelical Free Church, as it was located, I think, at 17th Street on North Congress, and it was a combination of two congregations, Elroy and I think out at Decker or someplace. At any rate, there were two congregations combined, and they worshipped here for a time, but as we had already found out with the Lutheran Church, the St. Martin's Church, Lutheran Church, this also had to give way to the expansion of government buildings to the north of the Capitol. And so the new church was erected at 45th and Red River, and we have that picture. And here it is where that congregation now worships and continues in their work within the city. May we have the next picture? This is a picture of the First English Lutheran Church. The Reverend Fred Kern, having returned from World War I, where he served as a chaplain, now determined that he would want to establish a church which used only English. And here the congregation was established. I had shown these slides some years ago at one of the high schools, and a little girl walked up to me and said, "You don't have our church in that." And so I thought maybe I'd find out. And the Reverend Fred Kern then served. Now these other pictures that we have left here now, for instance, it's not too distinct. I believe this is this is a picture that I took with an old box camera when you didn't have to ask anybody about going up to the top of the Capitol. And if it would show in there, if you could see it more distinctly, the old main building of the University of Texas looking north from the Capitol. Let's have the other picture. And this is a picture now looking in the same direction, and that shows the new Texas University tower on it. And I think that is right. This was also taken from the top of the Capitol. When that picture was taken, we had to go through some formalities before we could climb to the top of the Capitol, because they were wanting to avoid any kind of untoward things happening. And I had to write a letter to, at that time, the then Senator Lloyd Doggett, and he wrote a letter to the police department of the Capitol that Dr. Jack Heacock and I would be proper persons to go to the top. And when we finally got our permission there at their office, they gave us a set of 5 keys, lock everything as you go through. And that was an entirely different picture. But this is taken from the top. Let's have another picture here. This now is also a picture in the distance, and one of the pictures shows the building of St. Edward's College, as it was then known, dominating the horizon, and it still does today. And now, as we have another picture here, this was taken on a beautiful day, showing that kind of an almost oval approach to with the two streets coming on up to the Capitol. I remember still standing under the arch there, and once upon a time when my father was along, he said it's 83 feet up to the top of this keystone. And finally I found a young man in our church, and he went over there and they said, yes, it is 83 feet up to that. So, but here is a beautiful view that you have looking out to the south down Congress Avenue, and not all of the skyscrapers have yet been built at that time, but it shows you an expanse there. And let's have another picture, if you please. This is looking north now. This shows the tower of the University of Texas. And when we get to looking at pictures like this, it gives us an idea of what all the different religious organizations have as a challenge to them to emphasize the religious values of a faith in a personal God, and one who also demands certain ethical qualities on our own part. And we can't help but think of that when we see just the expansion of the city as it's going on. Is there another picture, please? And here is another view that was taken later, at the time when the Goddess of Liberty was being, the old one was being removed and the new one was being put in place. And I did not at that time have the formal privilege of going up to the top of the Capitol dome, and there was a young man at the church who could, and I gave him my camera and he took that picture, but it didn't have a nice sunshiny day like I had on that other one that preceded that. Is there another picture? This isn't just another scene that shows the surroundings of the Capitol. I can recall visiting in the home of an old retired colonel living south of the Bergstrom Air Force Base, and he told me, he said, I grew up in Austin. When we were boys, we'd always see who could go to the top of the Capitol the quickest. He said, and so we'd start one off and he would go running, and when he got up to the top of the Capitol, he would have a handkerchief or some kind of a flag that he'd wave, and we'd time him to see how fast he did it, and then others would do the same.
Some wonderful stories. And there's just so much to see how the buildings have grown and changed as the city has grown and changed. Yes. And I wonder what got you started in documenting all of this history for us.
Well, I got an assignment from the Travis County Historical Commission back in 1981. We had a History Appreciation Week, and the theme of that Appreciation Week was an armchair historical tour of Austin and Travis County, and they assigned me the churches. And so I took these pictures of principally the downtown churches of Austin. Sometimes facetiously I have said the picture of the downtown churches and those who flew the coop, who moved to other parts of town. And that is the way it was. Now those who serve as downtown churches, they have to have a good program. They have to have something that attracts people and makes them ready to go past maybe a number of other churches to come there. And yet they have a wonderful mission that they can perform. Mm-hmm. If they, and it puts all those churches that are in that area to a test.
That's right. Well, it seems to me that as the downtown commercial district is becoming revitalized, that is also happening to the downtown worship district. I wonder, we've got time for another question or so. I wonder if in all of these stories, all of these congregations from so many different faith traditions that you've done research on, if there's perhaps one story that sticks out the most for you, one that's the most touching, the most remarkable, whatever.
Well, I was mentioning a while ago about the St. Elias Church, how that there we have the stones that were first in one church downtown, and now they were built into a church of another group. That St. Elias Church is of the Archdiocese of New York and all of North America, of the Eastern Orthodox Church. And that, while that is a kind of maybe a special interest, yet it shows that here were people who came here and they found their way, and they developed a liturgy in English. A certain Miss Laureen Markelopoulos was the one who perfected that. Otherwise, much of their scripture would still be done in Greek. I can still remember driving through the Capitol grounds, coming to my church, and there was this old lady, tiny little someone. She was the mother of Pericles Chris, on her way over to the church. And we have a man in our church who was very knowledgeable in languages, and he's always wanted to get into conversation with her. He had been an archaeologist over in Greece. He wanted to keep his Greek speaking sharp. And she said nobody could speak Greek like that unless he was really Greek.
Showing the diversity of Austin.
Yes.
Briefly, do you have maybe a sentence or two of advice for someone in a congregation who wants to be sure their history is preserved? What should they do so that years from now we can tell their story?
Well, one who is an archivist tends to be a sort of a pack rat, and then other people says, get this junk out of here, and it's oftentimes they throw away something that is of real historical value, and that really ought to be put so that someone who wants to do some serious research can get at it and make use of it for historical purposes.
So that means saving the photographs, the worship bulletins, the newsletters, the special programs, all that sort of stuff, right?
Yes, that, and sometimes you run across some interesting things by accident. Like in the case of the Central Church, which was an English-speaking church of the Northern Methodist Church, and later became property of the Swedish people. But I had a book from the University of Texas Library, and somebody had borrowed it and left a little marker in there. And that marker was a small program of that dedication for that church.
And it
in
showed
1882.
Up. Wonderful. So you never know what treasures you're going to find.
We've got that hidden away somewhere. I hope I can find it again.
I hope you can too. Thank you for sharing the stories. I hope more people will call on you for that. And I hope all of you will pay attention to these stories and your own stories as we continue to tell the faith story here in Austin through Austin Faith Dialogue. Join us again next week too.